Hey guys, Nick Campanella here, and in this episode, I wanted to talk about something that I think is pretty interesting. Something that I've been discussing with a couple of different dealer friends of mine, and just a trend that I've seen, in the last 4 or 5 years that I've been doing this. It'll be 5 years in October of this year, and I wanted to just kind of get my thoughts on, the trend and where I see it going and what may have caused it, and things like that. And that's a trend that I've been seeing, and it's kind of that death of that high horology experience. And what I mean by that is not the death of high horology per se, as a timepiece. I mean, you're always going to have these really unique independent brands like Ming and other things like ALS, Lang and Sung. And that's always going to be high horology, at least in my opinion. MB&F and things like that. What I mean by high horology in class is that death of the experience of buying a watch, and kind of when I started Taylor Timepieces, and what I wanted to bring back is you had, at least in the old days, to my experience, and to my knowledge, you would have people that would come in, very much dressed like me, how I'm currently, with a suit and a nice shirt on and pressed shirt, and they would sell you a watch, and you'd kind of sit down and you'd experience something similar to what you would experience. I suppose if you were to walk into a Rolex AD and buy a watch. Now, it's not something that I do on a regular basis because, of course, as somebody who buys and sells watches for a living, walking into a Rolex AD, especially with an internet presence, they would notice me, and they would, of course, hey, they don't like resellers, so it's not something that I do. But when you walk into a dealership now, and they're presenting you a watch, it's an experience. They perhaps give you a glass of champagne. They will discuss with you. They'll sit you down. They'll compliment you. They'll show you some different options. And I feel like nowadays it's a very interesting dynamic where I think it's been replaced by the hustle culture. And it's that idea that I'm going to sell everything, and as long as you buy low, sell high, or you buy low and you sell for even if it's not high, maybe sell for a couple $100 above that, is can you survive in today's luxury timepiece environment without being a hustler? Not only on the seller side of, hey, I got all these watches and I'm hustling to sell it, but on the buyer side, has there been a shift and a damage to the trust of the industry in the way that people don't necessarily trust that what they see online anymore. You have Facebook and you have things like that, and scamming and these AI bots, and things like, if you saw what happened with Anthony over at TPG last year or 2 years ago. I do think that trust is going away, and I think that it's again, it's genuinely for lack of better phrasing, timepiece gentleman culture is kind of dissipating in today's environment. I think that a lot of these buyers need to be on edge, and a lot of these sellers also need to be on edge, because you have people that are dishonest, and it's kind of that idea of, like, how do we restore that to status quo. And I think that's one of my main missions at Taylor Timepieces, and why I started the industry, or why I started the business, was my desire to return watches and watch buying and watch selling to the status quo. I have a lot of friends in the tailoring industry because, of course, I like to get all my suits tailored. I think that a well-dressed man and somebody who is well put together is always going to garner a little bit more respect. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean a suit. It could mean whatever you're comfortable with. But for me, I'm most comfortable in a suit, and that's kind of what I rock almost every day when I'm out and doing my job. I was always very impressed and inspired by the idea that when you are making a suit, they treat you like a king. And I think that, like, the watch industry, it used to be that experience, and kind of, what happened and things like that. First of all, I think that a lot of this social media has really made it more accessible to a vast array of different people. And I think that um, is beneficial in a lot of ways, because of course we want as much access as we can as sellers of these products. I want to sell um, as many items as I can. But it also created an environment where these younger people, or maybe these people that are not as educated on the product from the buyer side, have access to these items. And you, of course, your main job as a salesperson is to educate them. But I think that, like, as a whole, it becomes very difficult, because it used to be an experience. You used to save up your whole life for a watch, or you used to it used to go in a shop. You used to have a relationship with a salesperson. Nowadays, especially on 47th Street, it's so fast paced, and a lot of the really respectable people have been removed from 47th Street or banned from 47th Street for what they're doing on the social platforms. But I think that in general, it can be a really difficult avenue to explore and entertain. I think that all in all, I think that it is something that can be really painful, and something that can be really hurtful in the long run. I think that in general, a lot of these people who want to make a name for themselves probably go about it incorrectly. I think that it can be something that can be really difficult and really hard to build. It's just something that's really hard to build in, as far as the reputation in this industry. And I think that, like, as a whole, we as a watch community have done I think, worse job in recent years of maintaining that level of class. So that's something that I think about is, hey, is that modern gentleman dead in the watch industry? You had, of course, one of the closest things was the Timepiece Gentleman, and that was a shit show. If we're being 100% honest here. And I think there were a lot of factors that contributed to things like that. I think, like I said, the client themselves is getting younger, and of course with youth comes a little bit of inexperience and education, as far as how do we have a knowledgeable conversation. And I'm guilty of that too. I mean, I'm in my late 20s right now, and there's a lot that I don't know. But I think there's a lot of people in this industry that are young, that just want to get a deal done, and basically they don't think about the future relationship with the client. And one of the things that we do very well here at Taylor Timepieces is that follow up. And I think that a lot of people have created an environment where they surprise when I call up clients and I say, hey, how did you like your purchase? Hey, is there anything I could do? How can I help you? Things like that. I think that watches themselves have become more of a status symbol and less of a item of horological excellence. Excuse me, a little bit of a tongue twister there. And I think that the best way to, change that is that education. I think that, like, I used to have clients that would come and they knew what they wanted, and they, were super educated. And now I would say a lot of my client base is skewing younger, and they'll come in and they'll say, hey, I have, $2,000 to spend, $3,000 to spend, $4,000 to spend. What do you have? And so, it's that idea that, I think that can't survive as well as maybe you could in previous years without that hustle mindset, and I think the hustle culture has really taken over. I think that, like, if we could collectively as a community return watch buying and selling into a luxury experience, because a lot of these people, if I'm buying my first watch, let's say I have five, six, seven, $10,000 to buy my first watch. I'm in my early 20s, late 20s, early 30s, whatever that milestone comes for you. I want to be treated like a king. I want to be treated like a queen. I want to sit down, and I want to be respected, and be spoken about in a very respectable and kind manner. So I think that, like, I think this culture now of, hey, I'm going to go to 47th Street and I'm going to buy a 1601 Datejust, and this guy pulls out a baggie. The amount of times that I'll show up on 47th, and they have their watches in baggies, or they have, they're buying in bulk. And I understand from a wholesale perspective it makes sense, because we do dabble in wholesale, of course. I mean, you can't have one end of the business without having the other end. But I think that, like, it's that idea that a lot of the culture behind timepieces and the education of that high horology entry point that we had, has really faltered, and it's something that I am hoping to bring back with Tailored Timepieces. Most of my clients know I love getting on the phone. I love doing a video call. I love meeting with clients. We do house calls if we can. Of course, they have to be close. They have to be in the New York, New Jersey area, and it's something I really want to bring back. So again, those are just my thoughts. I know it's a little bit of a rambling there. So thank you for bearing with me on that. But I do think the steps there are, of course, educating the clients with videos like this, with videos that a lot of these guys are putting out over at, like, places like Vucom, and different, even Roman Sharp to a certain extent. And I think that hopefully in time, you'll have a more educated client, and that more educated client will make a more educated purchasing decision. And it's my hope that those guys, those guys that I mentioned, are doing it right. I think that, like, they want to be treated. These clients want to be treated like every single one of them is personal. And I think that, like, for me, at Tailored Timepieces, it's marking those moments. So I really hope that we're able to do that, not just for existing clients but future clients. And I think that we have a long way to go before we've perfected that image as a not only as a culture of timepiece collectors, but as an industry. But I do think we can have a return to form in the coming years, and I'm excited for it. I think that, of course, there's always going to be those hustlers there that are always looking to make a quick buck, but I think the people that are consistent are going to have that main staying power, and again, I'm just glad to be a part of it. So thank you so much for listening to this rant, and I really appreciate all of you. Okay, bye bye now.